Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Mormon Newscast. It is Monday. It is May 4th. Do you think that we should go to our graphic? May 4th is a special day. And I am joined on this special day by
Is that why we have the emperor on the thumbnail?
That's exactly right. I'm joined by RFM and I'm joined by Bill Reel. Of course, I'm Rebecca Biblioteca. Let's go to our next slide. I think that's the one I was talking about. There it is. Happy May the 4th, right? Do you guys know that it's Star Wars Day? Were you aware of this?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, I have it. I've had it thrust upon my consciousness over and over enough to remember. I like the fact that I'm Obi-Wan over there.
Yeah. No, I think you're supposed to be Luke. And of course, Bill, has to be
I'm
Han
Luke?
Solo. You're Luke. Yeah.
Okay.
I asked AI to make, the power trio there. Exactly. Now, of course, I celebrate Star Trek Day, which is September 8th, but I'm okay celebrating May the 4th be with you too. So anyway, happy May the 4th.
I feel like my lightsaber is shorter than it is in actuality.
It's a little stubby, but that's okay. All right. Let's talk about what we're going to talk about here tonight. This is going to be a good action-packed, so much news. Oh my gosh, it just gets more and more every single episode we put out here. So let's see. We have, for some reason, I'm not.
Are you able to turn the slides, Rebecca?
There we go. Oh, I forgot. I have to go to RFM. You added this.
I put this in there when I thought it was Obi-Wan.
There you go.
Strike me down and I will become more powerful than you could possibly imagine.
I feel like that's John Dehlin's motto right now. Strike me down
kind of.
and I will become more powerful than you
They
could ever
haven't even
imagine.
down yet. They're just, getting ready for the swing.
Yep, that's it. Exactly. All right. Yes, I can turn the slides. I got my mouse all situated. So let's go over what we're going to talk about tonight. Is it a new day for LDS excommunications and lawsuits? That's a big story everybody's talking about this week. Wade Christofferson update. This was a big story from last week that we kind of put on hold because we wanted to give it the place of importance and the time that it took. Mormon political leanings are shifting. That's going to be Bill's story. I should say Wade Christofferson is going to be RFM's, and I'm going to talk about excommunications and lawsuits. Elder Stevenson tells young adults how to go even deeper. This is a very interesting story that I'm going to cover. Mormon dirty sodas on the national stage. That is Bill. This is a great one. I don't have my dirty soda with me, but I often do.
Rebecca?
Yes.
Is that a talk that Elder Stevenson gave about soaking?
We'll find out. Yeah. Just when you thought that the metaphors and the euphemisms, that they learned their lesson, they really haven't.
He didn't really say that, though. You're kidding, right?
Oh, no, you're going to find out. You're just going to have to wait till my presentation. Another story we're going to cover is how a missing tooth and super glue inspired thousands of women. This is a very interesting one that I stumbled across. LDS Temple building, where membership is shrinking, but malls are growing. That's my story too. And we'll end up with Bill. This is a fascinating story. Horror movies are using Mormon themes. Who'd have thought that, right? What could be so horrible about Mormonism? Don't know. All right, let's go. I believe I am the first here. There was an article. Hold on a second. There we go. There was an article in the Tribune about Landon Brophy, my co-host, and his excommunication, all the events leading up to it and the notification last week. But the article took sort of a big picture view, and our thumbnail kind of reflects that of, are there lawsuits? Are there excommunications? Are they on the horizon? Is this a new day now that we have a prophet who's a litigator? And I just wanted to add this slide really quick. I, of course, made that. Dallin, meet Barbara. I understand it's spelled wrong. You don't have to correct me. Barbara Dallin. And of course, I'm referring to Barbara.
Can I correct you anyway, even if I don't have to?
No, okay. AI did it and I didn't catch it. You cannot. Anyway, of course, I'm referring to the Barbara Streisand effect, where you draw attention to something that you don't really want out in front, and then it just, gets legs and it gets going. And I noticed that just in the last, I think, 5 days, these 3 articles, of course, the John Dehlin lawsuit has been covered locally. We've all been talking about it. There's lots of different posts and information on Ex-Mormon Reddit, Mormon Stories podcast. The Tribune has covered some of it. The Deseret News has said something, but now it's starting to go national. And these are the 3 of the ones that I saw in Salon And the Chicago Sun-Times, they tie it to Wade Christofferson. They tie it to what RFM's going to talk about. They're kind of all over this. And this is Slate. That's the one that just came out today. So if you guys want to go look those up, they are starting to talk, Barbara Streisand effect, about this lawsuit that the LDS Church has launched against Mormon Stories and John Dehlin. So very interesting. All right, let's go. Any thoughts on the fact that it's starting to snowball, either of you, before we get into the article in the Trib?
I'll save my comments.
Okay.
I was just wondering if that was a patriarchal grip.
Yeah, it kind of looks like it. And I did not tell AI to do that. So
The one with Thomas Monson and George W. I think it are the people involved.
Yeah,
Anyway,
they're always trying to do it. All right. Most of you have probably heard that my co-host on Mormonish podcast, Landon, did receive a letter that he had been excommunicated. And the letter was a little questionable itself. We'll talk about that kind of at the end of this Tribune article. The title is Utah Podcaster Says LDS Church Booted Him Out for Apostasy. This first line is my favorite. A Utah podcaster known for criticizing the leaders, policies, and beliefs of the LDS Church, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, announced this week that he has received a letter notifying him that he has been removed from the faith rolls for apostasy. I just love that. How would you like to find yourself in the Tribune with a picture saying that you're known for criticizing the LDS Church when all of your relatives are in and friends and family? But anyway,
it's a good picture.
It's a good picture. That's what I say. Landon just kind of rolls with it. The interesting thing that they bring up in the article, and of course, Tamara interviewed me and interviewed Landon, and a lot of this is on our podcast that we put out right after we got the letter, is that, he hasn't really been on the podcast for about the last 18 months because of work. I've talked about his intensive international schedule. So you really, when you tune into Mormonish, won't see him. I mean, he's on maybe once a month, if that. Also, the fact that he hasn't attended his ward, had anything to do, set foot inside of a building for almost 8 years. And typically we see excommunications happen when it's somebody that is attending, that's interacting with members on a daily basis or a weekly basis. They tend to leave people who've, really stepped away alone. But in this case, no. This is not what happened. And basically, the short version, the story is that in the fall, he received some phone calls from a neighbor who is now a bishop. He thought it was tithing settlement. He ignored it. He received a notification of an attempt to deliver a registered letter, but he'd been out of town, too late really to get it from the post office. So he didn't really know what was going on. He had his suspicions, but his philosophy is, I'm not going to play their game, go through their hoops, and I'm not going to give them any power. So he just sort of, let the letters roll in. He got another letter that said, on this particular day, we're going to hold a court of love for you. We knew the time, we knew the date. I kind of looked at him at that exact time, and I did sort of see the light go out of his eyes, but I don't know if that's just me imagining it. And then we got this final letter that I'll show later, saying that yes, he had been excommunicated. Membership withdrawn is what they call it now. Court of love, and welcome to come back, welcome to council, and go through the steps to repent, right? And it said that he was in direct contradiction to the teachings of Christ or the scriptures, or contrary to historical data. And he said he would agree with that. But really what they're saying is that you disagree with the church. So anyway, he has an attitude about it where he's like, yep, you know what? It makes sense, but it was strange the way it happened.
I really like the way that Landon made that distinction.
Yeah.
That they accused him and said that he had disagreed with the church and the leaders. And he says, notice they did not say that it was in direct contradiction to the teachings of Christ or the scriptures, or contrary to historical data.
Yep. Just the church. That's exactly right. So they put up a link, I guess, to our podcast. They talked about, it's pretty funny. It's pretty small compared to like a John Dehlin or an Alyssa Grenfeld. It's kind of interesting. They would even reach in and kind of pluck him out and do this. Talks about how we try to cover topics, joyful life, navigating faith journeys outside of Orthodox Mormonism. So it was a good article, but like I said, it was in a framework of a bigger picture. This, of course, is the lovely Julie Hanks. And she kind of talks about, the fact that, is it a new day? Why would they go after Landon? Are they now going to target all kinds of people? She's still on the rolls, although she's taken a lot of heat and pressure from certain LDS podcasters who have gone after her personally for the things that she shares. They talked about Nathan and Valerie Haymaker, who kind of anticipated, I think we're going to get called into a court, and they just removed their record. records. So it's almost like everybody's kind of scampering, right? And they're treating it in different ways. Somebody like Nemo went through the full process, right? He went to the meetings, he attended his court of love, and gave everybody a lot of information about that throughout. Our other interesting point was that our podcast has been running for 3.5 years, going on 4 years. Nobody's ever said a word. Nobody's reached out. Nothing has happened. Why now? I think, why now? And then it talked about me. They have a hard time quoting me because they can't use my real name, but they mentioned that, Landon's podcast co-host goes by this pseudonym. And I'm sure in the comments, there are all kinds of people on the Trib giving them my real name. I really do not mind that. That is fine. I use a pseudonym. I guess I'll say it now because when I first started, my parents were still alive. And, I did not remove my records because they would see that instantly when they looked at their records. And it was just kind of respect for family and that kind of thing. So we'll see what happens. I'm anticipating anything. So
they did quote you there, though, didn't they?
What was that?
They did quote you right there.
That's what I'm saying. They kind of quoted me in a roundabout way because, that's a fictitious name. So in the past, when they wanted to quote me and I said, please don't use my real name, they could not quote me. So yes, they have me saying that's one reason I don't share my full name. I prefer flying under the radar. And that's true. I do. Although how can any of us really fly that far under the radar? That's the thing.
I think you've been on the radar for a long time, actually.
I don't know.
Especially when it started with that whole temple thing of yours.
I don't know. I have a theory about that too. Anyway, the bottom line is it was a great article. You guys can check it out in the Tribune, but it really was framed in this wider context of President Oaks. And, is he now going after podcasters? You guys remember this just a few months ago?
Yes.
I can't, let's see, it's too small for me. RFM, why don't you just read that really quick? This was his statement at a devotional at BYU.
Yeah. Remember to survive spiritually, you will need the constant influence of the Holy Ghost. An abundance of speculation and false information in podcasts and on social media surround us. Some may protest or question the truth of church doctrine without knowing or even understanding the fullness of that doctrine. And then there are other people like us who know and understand it completely and still question it. In fact, that's why we question it.
Exactly.
Don't be persuaded by false or inaccurate information like I'm giving to you right now. Discuss your concerns with faithful, well-informed friends who are Mormons and who believe what I say.
Wow.
Well-informed friends, and always take those concerns to the Lord, who will tell you that we are right. No, that was February 10th, 2026.
It was just a couple of months ago. That was an interesting part of Landon's story that he shared on our podcast is that, when he was questioning, he went to every leader he could find. He sat for 3 hours with this bishop talking about questions. And the bishop said, I've never heard any of this. And I thought, yeah, that's why you're the bishop, and his final discussion was, I will talk to anybody from this stake that can help me, give me some answers, help me find peace. Please send me somewhere to talk to someone, anyone. He never heard another word for 7.5 years until he started getting the letters about excommunication.
You are out of here. That was an excommunication.
So yeah, this bigger picture is what's interesting. And before we go on to just this last little part about his actual letter, I want to get both of your takes on, is this a bigger picture? Is this John Dehlin lawsuit, Landon all of a sudden out of the blue? Is there something brewing? What do you think, Bill?
Well, two things. One, I'll say this. I think it's a strange thing for a religious system to go after a whistleblower who has, especially in recent months, made note of like the child abuse stuff going on. Landon's in the comments here again. Maybe he hasn't been on the show as much, but he certainly is vocal in other places. And it's a weird look for a system to be going after people, John Dehlin being another one, who are shining a light on the child abuse epidemic that goes on in Mormonism. So I'll say that first. And I don't want to steal RFM's thunder here, but something I mentioned to you guys in the chat earlier today is that RFM drew attention to this. I don't know how long ago it was, RFM. 8 months ago.
Episode 363. Thank you for asking. It's not there anymore.
Yeah, it's gone. But it was a brochure, pamphlet, document handed out by the church that was, I believe, authored by Elder Oaks.
It was a slide deck. for his presentation to the leadership training it was 2 years ago in the summer, I think.
Did you put that in the slideshow? I think we have that. If you want to go ahead
two
to
from
that.
it. I have the first slide.
Yeah.
And here's the
Why
thing.
don't you
I can talk.
Please.
skip ahead to that, and then I'll go backwards and talk about the actual excommunication letter really quick, because I think it's relevant here. We are talking about the big picture and President Oaks and perhaps this agenda.
Sure. Okay, so let's see here. Let me just take this off the screen for a second. Hang on a second. Or take that off the screen for a second. That way I can go through without showing all of the things that you have in between.
I think there's only 3 slides in between. 3 or 4. There you go.
Or 5 maybe. But anyway, this is the opening slide, okay? Now I showed all the slides because I had a person leak them to me, and then we got to take down those. We had to take it down. And then sometime later, it occurred to me, well, I can do the whole thing without actually showing the slides. I can read them as they are and as they were when President Oaks used these to tell the leadership in a super secret meeting, which was definitely written by him. Otherwise, the church could not have claimed copyright infringement on it. There, they also admitted that they were the authors, that it was their property. So that much is interesting. But having said that, this is the opening slide. And what he's saying to all the leaders is, we're not having enough excommunications, guys. Let's get it together. It's called Repentance and Church Membership Councils, training by President Dallin H. Oaks. And I am going to include one other slide. It's from the end of this. And I think it's okay because it's quoting a talk he gave at BYU back in the year, well, what was it? 1990? Yeah, it was published in the Ensign in July of 1992, but it was the talk he gave at BYU in 1990. And I want to say that this is very interesting that he quotes this, because it did not occur to me, even though I've been over this slide deck, I've made 2 podcasts about it, but this idea did not occur to me until today, that he quotes himself from 1992 in the Ensign. Yeah, it's a vanity quote. Don't you love it when people quote themselves? And it's an extended quote. That we need to have more excommunications, that excommunication is a good thing. It involves suffering on the part of the person who's repenting. And if we focus only, he says, if we focus only on cleaning the leaves of this tree, he's got a tree and it's bending in the wind and it's bending all the way over and getting its leaves soiled in the ground. Okay, so it has soil on its leaves. If we focus only on cleaning the leaves, the weakness in the tree that allowed it to bend and soil its leaves may remain. I wonder if President Oaks has soiled his leaves recently. That's what I'd like to know, actually. Soiled its leaves may remain. Similarly, a person who is merely sorry to be soiled by sin, by the seashore, will sin again in the next high wind. The susceptibility to repetition continues until the tree has been strengthened. And of course, it's going to be strengthened by excommunication is the whole point. The reason I think this is interesting is because I'm wondering if we're seeing the same kind of thing with President Oaks that we saw with President Nelson. President Nelson comes in, slam bang with this Mormon thing. We trace it back to 1990. It was 1990, I'm pretty sure, in April. General Conference, where he gave that talk about how bad Mormon is. And he had to wait till he became president to be unleashed, to coin a phrase. And here is Dallin Oaks, and this is the reference. This is from the July 1992 Ensign, Speaking Today. It's actually speaking 2 years ago, but we'll call it Speaking Today. Sin and Suffering by Elder Dallin H. Oaks. And it's from a fireside address given at Brigham Young University, August 5th, 1990. I think he's been sitting on this for a long time and been waiting to become the president so that he could become the new Torquemada over the latter-day Spanish Inquisition.
I'll say one more. I'm so sorry, Arvin. I'll say one more thing. It is also strange to have a man telling people about how excommunications are necessary for the sinners when this guy was a part of the SEC scandal, lied about electroshock therapy at BYU, has hateful things still on the church's website about how to treat one's LGBT sons and daughters. This guy has a track record as long as anyone in the top leadership at doing harmful, dishonest, deceitful, damaging things. And somehow the leaders of the church are above the repentance process. They are outside the loop, and yet he gets to stand on his bully pulpit, and he gets to talk down to the people who are simply shining a light on the dishonesty and harmful behaviors of the church, as if the good guys are the bad guys.
Yep, no, that's a great observation. And we'll see. I guess the test will be what happens next, right? Let's see. I think I'll go back just a couple to answer one question very quickly. Let's see. Did I already move your slide? Did you move my slide?
I did. I moved them,
you moved
and then
it.
I
All right.
put them
See,
back
we're
up.
always messing with
For
each
your
other's
convenience.
slides. Yeah, behind the
This is
scenes.
what
It's
hap-
great.
This is what happens when I try and help out.
Nobody knows what's going to pop up. You're like, oh, who added that? There was this question: was Landon excommunicated by the Strangites? And I will answer that once and for all. The letter that he received was a little strange. It didn't use his full name. It just called him Brophy. Apostasy was misspelled with a C. I don't even know how you would pronounce that. And the name of the church has a small t in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. There is no hyphen and small d. That is the correct spelling of the LDS church. This spelling is, what the church kind of originally was. And the Strangites owned that, which is why the LDS church in the 1850s had to add the hyphen. So we were questioning, did this even come from the LDS church? It just seemed very strange. There were no signatures. There were just the name of all the presidents. Everyone's a president who excommunicated him. So I wanted to learn a little bit more about excommunication letters. I thought that would be interesting. But I will say we know this letter is legitimate because he did receive voicemails from his bishop, a voice he recognized. So unless everybody's in on this vast conspiracy, it was real, but kind of half, what?
Or just someone who sounds like his bishop.
Exactly, that's true. Somebody said it's as Timu.
Who hasn't seen, I guess, in how long? Or his bishop lives next door.
Yeah, neighbors, but didn't know was the bishop. It's one of those things where somebody calls you up and suddenly he's got the name bishop in front of his name. And you're like, oh, okay, a lot has changed. But I did talk to a stake president friend of mine, and he looked at the letter and he said, oh my gosh, how embarrassing. It's sloppy. I don't want to judge the education level of the people who are writing it. I did. I looked them up. They're directors of engineering firms, like they should know how to write a letter. But he did give me some interesting information that there used to be more of a template for it from Salt Lake, but now there really isn't anything. It's just kind of these little instructions here about, make it timely, make sure they know they're excommunicated, tell them they can come back. And I really think that's by design. They do not want an official logo. They don't want anything going back to the church proper. It's all local leaders, just like in the Mountain Meadows Massacre. Everything is local leaders, plausible deniability. So any of us who get excommunicated should probably not expect a very formal looking letter unless your particular stake has letterhead and you have leaders that decide to do that on their own. So there you go. That's the story. Any final thoughts? And we'll move on to RFM's story.
Yeah, I'm still voting for it being a hoax, just so you know.
Really?
Yeah.
Well,
I think this is going to be really funny if it turns out to be a hoax.
It will be very interesting. But yeah, I'm pretty sure it's not a hoax. But they might up their game for their next excommunication letter. That's all I'm saying.
Has Landon asked his next door neighbor bishop yet?
No, he hasn't seen him, and he's not going to seek him out probably. I mean, what do you do? Mowing the lawn? Hey, great court of love. What'd you guys all talk about when I wasn't there? And you haven't seen me for 7 years, huh?
We say some asshole sent me this fake letter saying it was signed by the stake presidency. It wasn't, was it?
Now, that's an interesting tactic. We might have to take that.
Just an idea. Okay, so anyway, this is from a story from Tamara Kinsley, Salt Lake Tribune, April 25th, 2026. It is more than a week old because we didn't do it last time. It does require some time. There's several moving parts here, and it's complicated a bit, not only in its chronology, but also location-wise, because it happens in different states. We're talking about Wade Christofferson, and the headline was New Accuser Emerges in Wade Christofferson Case. LDS Church addresses what his apostle brother, D. Todd, knew. Okay. And by the way, that is Tamara Kinsley, not the person coming forward. In November, Wade Christofferson was arrested and charged with federal crimes after he allegedly attempted last year to sexually exploit a child in Utah. Okay. He was in Ohio at the time. It was over the phone. It involves, what was it? Snow and Friends, if you remember.
Yeah. Code
And
word.
apparently a member of the family and a grandchild, or even possibly great grandchild. We're not exactly sure, and that's okay. In Utah, over the phone, that's why he's charged in Ohio. Federally, though, but he's in Ohio jail. I believe that they said no bail for you. So that's where he is right now. Federal prosecutors said at the time that the father of an Ohio child, this is different. This is a father of an Ohio child, probably another member of the family, had reported that month, that same month of November last year, to police in that state, Ohio, that Wade Christofferson had sexually abused the Ohio daughter. In other words, this father's daughter, more than a dozen times. No charges have been filed in connection with that report. You know, November's starting to get a long time away. I'm wondering why there's no charges filed with that report. I know you want to do an investigation and everything, and you don't have to hurry because, you know, he's in custody on something else, right? So there's no reason you have to hurry, but still, November, what's that, 5 months now? I wonder what the holdup is. 5 months after Wade Christofferson was charged with attempting to sexually exploit a Utah child, that's the one from November, over the phone, a woman has stepped forward to publicly disclose that as a young teenager, decades ago, back in the 1990s, she reported to a Latter-day Saint bishop that Wade Christofferson had sexually abused her in Illinois. Now, Illinois is where Wade Christofferson used to live. I don't think any of this stuff has to do with Utah except over the phone. And I'm talking about not just audio, but video on the phone. I think everybody today probably understands that. Okay. But Wade Christofferson lived originally, or at least as early as we need to go in these facts, in Illinois, in the Chicago area, Bill. And then after things went south for him, it appears somewhere around that time in the 1990s where he got excommunicated. He moved to Ohio, where he was reinstated and got new callings of leadership. So that's what's going on there. Now, this lady, whose name is given here in a second, I think it's Mautz, Moutz, she was in junior high school at the time in Illinois, back in the early 1990s. At the time of her report, she and Wade Christofferson, a brother of a now high-ranking Latter-day Saint apostle, that's D. Todd Christofferson, who's in the first presidency, attended the same congregation in Illinois. So she's there with Wade Christofferson and his family, and she's a kid. Speaking at an April 17 event held at Harvard Divinity School, Kristen Dunbar Moutz, Mautz, that's her name, now 48, said, "I did what I thought I should do." And yes, that's what we're told, which is going to end up being reported to the bishop. It's a bit of a delayed report, and that's something that will help us to understand things in here too. In an interview with the Tribune, Moutz, this newly come forward victim, allegedly, said Wade Christofferson sexually abused her at least twice in or around 1990, about the time she was in 8th grade, while she was staying the night at the Christofferson home. So she's probably friends with his daughter or daughters. Something she said she did often as a family friend. And as it turns out, her family and the Christofferson family are all friends with the bishop's family as well. And they all do things together. I went to my bishop. Now, this is not going to be immediately after, though. That's the impression from the way this story is organized. It's going to be a time after this, okay? I went to my bishop, she said, at the symposium on religious trauma, the one at Harvard. I reported it to my bishop. I was a child expecting safety, expecting protection. The adults, she thought, would decide what the consequences should be, caution others, set things right. And yes, of course, that's what most kids think adults are going to do when you report something to them. That was not the case here, at least not immediately. Instead, I was given a punishment, Mount said. I was forced to sit in that congregation Sunday after Sunday and watch him sitting up on the stand, serving in the bishopric, a position of honor and trust. In a statement to the Salt Lake Tribune, a spokesperson for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints said that Wade Christofferson was excommunicated more than 30 years ago. So this is a hard fact. I can't imagine they'd be saying if it weren't true. He was excommunicated more than 30 years ago. He was then rebaptized before again serving for a brief time, is what the statement says. That's why it's in big purple letters over here on the right on the slide. For a brief time as a member of a bishopric, this time in Ohio. Remember, he moved to Ohio. We're going to come back to the for a brief time here in a second. This is what the church said. I'm sorry. This is what the church lied. That it was for a brief time. The statement from the church also stressed that Apostle D. Todd Christofferson, who must not get soiled, he must not get his leaves soiled as part of this, a member of the faith's governing First Presidency, did not know about any allegations of abuse against his younger sibling until 5 or 6 years ago. It says on or around 2020. That sure seems pretty late in the ball game under all the circumstances, both familial and ecclesiastical. Mounts, once again, this victim who came forward, alleged victim, who remains a committed member of the faith, by the way. She's still a strong Mormon. Said the recent criminal charges against Wade Christofferson, the ones from last November, are what compelled her to come forward. She argues that her experience is evidence that reform is needed to better protect members from predators in the pews. By the way, I'm probably about halfway through this story. Do either of you have anything you want to comment on right now?
I've got things to say, but I think I'll wait to the end. I think it'll make more sense there.
Okay, Rebecca?
Yeah, just, I had been following Floodlit's coverage of the different alleged victims from the 90s, and they weren't giving their names when the story first came out. And, to see someone, come out, and I recognized the story from Floodlit when she was unnamed, and then put a name and a face to the experience, just absolutely devastating. But to know that she presented this in a address to the Harvard Divinity School, I mean, that's not just telling your story to a local reporter. She's putting that out there. It's big, and she's very brave to do that.
I'm glad they picked up on that. The press. At a bail hearing Thursday, so this is a week ago, last Thursday, in Ohio, a federal magistrate ruled that Christofferson, Wade, will remain in custody. Prosecutors argued in part that they have strong grounds for the case against him. Well, they always argue that, but this next part's interesting. They also said they have evidence that, quote, reflects additional victims at church where he held leadership roles. Other alleged conduct includes sexual assault of very young children. So they're alleging they have additional victims or evidence of additional victims. I don't know what that evidence is. And I trust they're not talking out of their hat, but they actually are referring to actual evidence of actual additional alleged victims. A year or so after the alleged abuse, okay, Mounts said Wade Christofferson was called to be a counselor in a bishopric. She has not reported this yet. So this is a year or so after the alleged abuse. Mount said Wade Christofferson was called to be a counselor in a bishopric, a trio of lay leaders who oversee a congregation. We know that. She was in high school then and said she felt the time had come to inform the bishop, a close family friend, of the alleged abuse. So this was a year-delayed report or disclosure, at least to the bishop. The three families, she said, the three families, ours, the bishop's, and the Christoffersons, were all really close, Moutz recalled. We did everything together. It kind of makes me wonder if her dad was the other counselor in the bishopric. It didn't have to be, but it could be. Moutz said she assumed the bishop, a trusted father figure, would believe her and that Wade Christofferson would be immediately demoted. Instead, she said, he remained in his post for a time. At some point, he was replaced, she remembered, but not on any kind of time frame that felt connected to me and my conversation with the bishop. Meanwhile, she said, Wade Christofferson was a frequent presence. Now, this is in the year, this is how I'm understanding her, in the year between his molestation of her in 8th grade and when he was called to be in the bishopric, and then she told the bishop, right? In that intervening year. Meanwhile, she said Christofferson was a frequent presence at youth activities and someone often tasked with providing transportation for those activities. The church, for its part, emphasized in its statement that it is not aware of any abuse involving Wade Christofferson's volunteer church service. Okay, now I emphasize that. That was not emphasized in the article. The church, for its part, emphasized in its statement that it is not aware of any abuse involving Wade Christofferson's volunteer church service. Okay, I emphasize that because that's what the church is emphasizing, even if they're not emphasizing it. What they're saying is the church is not liable for anything he did that was not related to his church service. It didn't happen on church property. It didn't happen as he was acting as a bishop. Therefore, we are not responsible. Now, I know that sounds horrible. As a legal doctrine, respondeat superior, it's pretty clear, at least in a lot of incidents. It would be like, Bill, if you run a taxi company, you own a taxi company, yellow taxi, and you've got a taxi driver who's out there drinking and driving in the taxi and he hits someone and kills them, they can sue your company. But if the same guy is not driving the taxi, but he's at home, it's the weekend, and he gets drunk and he gets in his car and goes out and kills somebody, you're not liable. Does that part make sense?
Yeah.
That's what they're talking about. The problem, I think, here is that as a church, I would think that they would want to have some kind of morality that would lead them to want to protect their own children, even if they would not be civilly liable for failing to do so. In other words, protect your children from sexual predation just because it's the right thing to do. Is that too much to ask? Is that part clear? What I'm trying to get at least? Yeah, you're legally maybe not liable, but morally and ethically and before God Almighty, you're liable.
Well, and don't you think there's a fine line when it comes to youth activities in the 90s? You know, you'd go sleep over at your young woman leader's house, right? Mm-hmm. Her husband's there. Is that a church activity? You know, yes. It's kind of part of what you planned. So I think there was a lot of that going on back and forth. He was the youth guy. And I will say, if I can just add this, there was, when Floodlit kind of put out some information, that Wade was very good friends with different people in higher positions in those wards, and he was not being disciplined. Even though people were coming forward with alleged claims, it was not until there was a change in leadership and someone was not his friend that somebody decided to look into it.
Right, so, and that's after she goes to college or comes back from college.
Yes, when she comes back. So there's protections. Old boys club, maybe. You know, somebody's your friend, they can't believe it or give them a pass. Not until is there a change, and that kind of explains why multiple people were saying these things were allegedly happening and nothing was being done. I believe he was being protected because of friendships in the stake.
And I think I misinterpreted what she had said here. Meanwhile, she said Christofferson was a frequent presence. I think she's talking about after he was released from the bishopric.
Yeah.
Not before. So it's a year. She complains. He finally gets released, so it's not in the time that she connects with her reporting it, right? But finally he is released. But meanwhile, he still is a frequent presence because he's a member of the church. Of course he is. You know it. At youth activities. Of course, he's got kids. He's going to be there. And someone often tasked with providing transportation for those activities, because you cannot find enough people in the church to do all the transportation you need for the activities. You will call on anybody to transport these kids. Okay, I think that's what she meant. Now, this next slide, Mount said she left the Chicago suburb and its tight-knit Latter-day Saint community for college in 1995, determined to put the experience behind her, but was summoned into the bishop's office during a visit home in December of 1996. She recalled that the new bishop, invited her in to speak with her. He said, this is according to her, he said, some girls have come forward and have talked to me about some experiences that they've had with Wade Christofferson. She remembered. It's been mentioned, he went on, it's been mentioned that maybe you'd had an experience also, and I was wondering if you would be willing to share that with me. She said she did share it with him. Now, you notice a discrepancy here in the chronology, because she has him being excommunicated in, I believe it's 93. Hang on a second. It's 93, I think it is. And here, I'm sorry, the church has him excommunicated in 93. And here it has to happen after 95, I believe, because he still hadn't been excommunicated yet. Otherwise, why would he have to take care of anything?
I think it's 96, and I did question that, why 93, but other things that I've read led me to believe it might be 96. But again, it's after finally new change in the regime, new leaders, and they're going back, digging through the past, going, oh my gosh, how is this happening?
Right. After she was done recounting the alleged sexual abuse, Mount said she remembers the man, the bishop, the new bishop, saying, yeah, unfortunately, that pretty much sounds like the same thing that other girls are telling us. I underlined other girls, multiple, plural. And why is this new bishop the guy who has to take action? It sounds like, she was not included in what was going on with Wade's membership. And so I don't know about that 1993. I don't know what the church is basing it on. Obviously, they would have the records, but it doesn't make sense that she remembers it this way. And, coming back after your first year in college, right? Or second for Christmas. I don't know. Maybe she's remembering that wrong, or maybe she isn't. But they haven't gotten to him yet. They haven't excommunicated him yet. And she has gone from being in 8th grade to the next year when she reports it to the bishops. That's 9th grade, 10th, 11th, 12th grade. She goes off to college for a year and a half. And now the new bishop calls her and says, hey, we've been hearing from other girls some stuff about Wade Christofferson, and maybe you had something like that happen. Okay. So anyway, I think that they were not taking care of business in a speedy enough fashion. Okay. She said this bishop was the first person that was like, are you okay? Well, that's something. Toward the end of the conversation, she said, he told her, I'm going to take care of this. See, what would there be to take care of if he'd been excommunicated? It's not right. It's not okay. Unless they were going to report it to police, which I don't think happened. The next time she visited by the way, I think we should underscore that. Could you underscore that for us, Rebecca? In the middle, in all of this, the police were never contacted, apparently.
No, it was handled internally, as these things often are. Even to the point where when there was discipline, it was never told why. No one was warned. No one was told. No, parents were told to watch out for their kids or talk to their now college-age daughters and find out. Nothing ever happened like that. Never. And this is what happens in the church all the time. And this is why things are allowed to continue. And it's just horrifying.
I didn't want that part to get lost.
Yeah.
In the story, because in all of this, the police were never called.
Yep.
Years and years. And that's just in this time period from 1990 to 1996, for crying out loud. Okay. The next time she visited the congregation, She said she noticed that Wade Christofferson no longer had a calling. That means he's excommunicated, or volunteer position in the church. That's their description of what a calling is. We know what a calling is in the Mormon church. She took it as a sign that his membership had been withdrawn, that he'd been excommunicated. The church's statement confirmed that Wade Christofferson's membership was withdrawn, saying that that action took place in 1993. See, there's the discrepancy. Members of the congregation were not told the reason, it explained, as was consistent with church policy and Illinois law at the time. I have no idea why they're citing Illinois law.
Isn't that a strange thing to say we can't tell a church congregation about a predator among them because of some unknown Illinois law that no one understands where it is or what they're talking about?
Yeah, and what the hell kind of church policy is this? I mean, I understand, and I was around then. You know, I've been a Mormon for a long time. There were times when people get excommunicated, and the announcement would be made only in priesthood, opening exercises. I don't know if the youth were released or whatever, but, you know, this isn't something for the women folk. Only the men could know about this. And it was about that so-and-so has been excommunicated, and we wanted you to know that. And that was it, because they wouldn't say why or what it was over. And they might say, you know, we need to reach out to them and try in love and all that kind of stuff. But that was all that was said. There were never any details given. And I don't know why. I have no idea. I mean, if they had a guy who was convicted of murder and he's still on the loose, would you not tell the members?
Maybe
but they did let one rumor fly, and that was adultery with someone at work, right? They didn't do anything to shut that down. They said, yeah, we'll go with that. That's fine. I do question his wife must have asked questions about that, you know, adultery at work. And when it came time to be rebaptized and getting your priesthood blessings back, she would have to weigh in when it's adultery. That's all fabricated. It's not adultery. And 15 men on the high council knew it wasn't adultery. And they all probably had kids in the ward. So I just cannot fathom this, that it's okay to let it fly. And in their mind, you know, adultery, yeah, that sounds, yeah, we want to protect him. Let's just say it was adultery. Yeah, it's one of the most horrible parts of the story.
Them saying they can't do anything, but, you know, we got a church policy. Maybe the reason the Mormon church, you're in the news all the time over child abuse is because of your policies. Maybe the policies need changed rather than holding them up and going, well, we've got these policies. We can't make any moves. And, you know,
the policy,
maybe they're the problem.
Hands are tied.
They're the worst kind of, you know, bureaucrats. Well, it's the policy. We have to follow the policy. Well, why? Because your policy is stupid. All right, let's go ahead. Per the church's handbook from that period, policy also required stake presidents to alert the first presidency of excommunications and submit all related documents. Now, that's not completely true. The first presidency definitely knew about it, but they're not just alerting the first presidency. Let's go on where a similar, I'm going to quibble with the word here. Local leaders also would have been instructed to notify church headquarters of Wade Christofferson's rebaptism. The reason I'm quibbling is because it's not alerting them. They have to approve it.
Yes.
They have to approve his rebaptism into the church. They have to approve. They're taking the asterisk off of his record, because when he was excommunicated for child molestation, the handbook requires the asterisk go on his record so that, you know, it will follow him and people know we've got a problem here. We need to protect the kids. Well, they took it off when they rebaptized him. And then
that's actually not quite right. If I could just explain that. The first thing they have to do is request a rebaptism, and the leadership, the top leadership, first presidency, has to say, okay, get rebaptized. So he's rebaptized after about a year. The next thing they have to request and get the stamp of approval on is restoration of priesthood blessings. Second touch point, where the first presidency looked at Wade Christofferson and said, yeah, sounds good. Let's give him his priesthood back. Face-to-face interview with an area rep who then would restore the priesthood blessings. Then, third touch point, another stamp of approval. Can he have his asterisk removed? Yes. So 3 times the first presidency looked at Wade. Maybe they outsourced it. I don't know. I feel like they looked at him because of who he was and said, seems like a good idea. let's let him back in with full benefits. And that takes time. It's not just right away. So they're looking at him every 6 months. I don't know what the whole time frame was. By 2006, he was back in a bishopric. But when I learned those 3 touch points, stamps of approval where they said it's okay, I said, where's discernment? But yeah, the article doesn't quite explain it correctly.
Thank you for clarifying that for us, Rebecca. This was where it is in the church handbook, where it is today anyway, removing formal restrictions or being readmitted to the church. This may be actually repeating what it is that you were talking about.
Yeah, I think it is.
Okay, but it's definitely in there, and it definitely is talking about sexual abuse of a child. If you're excommunicated for that, then you have to apply for the first presidency approval to be rebaptized and to get your blessings restored and any nasty little asterisks removed. Wade Christofferson, later moved to Ohio, where the church said, remember, he again served in a bishopric for a brief time. Can these guys tell the truth? I mean, if they tried really hard, do you think they could once? Well, this is a little meme, I think, that you created, Rebecca.
Yeah.
The LDS Church claims Wade Christofferson served only briefly in a bishopric calling that gave him access to children after his rebaptism. Is this accurate? Now, I had to break it up a little bit because it was so small, the print. Now it's a little bit fuzzy. Hey, Bill, could you read this slide? Are you able to?
Yeah, sure can. In a statement to the Salt Lake Tribune, a spokesperson for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints said that Wade Christofferson was excommunicated more than 30 years ago. He was then rebaptized before again serving for a brief time, quote unquote, as a member of the bishopric, this time in Ohio. A brief time is not accurate. The LDS Church is downplaying that Wade Christofferson was returned to full fellowship and served in positions of trust with access to children. Here are the positions that Wade Christofferson served in once he was rebaptized, had his priesthood blessings restored, and had his asterisk for his CSA, child sex abuse, removed from his church record. All 3 of these touch points required LDS first presidency approval, and having his priesthood blessings restored required a meeting with an area rep face to face.
And now, since you came up with these details, Rebecca, could you read the second part of this?
Oh, no, I can't. Sorry, too fuzzy.
No?
Let Bill keep reading.
Okay, I'll do that. Wade Christofferson was the second counselor in a bishopric from 2006 to 2011. Are you guys keeping track? This is 5 years.
5 years. That's a full bishopric term.
Yep. And by the way, the counselors are always responsible for sitting down with youth and handling some of the youth interviews, both for the women, for the girls, and for the boys.
Now, nobody was in danger here because this is a young adult ward, see?
But they're still young. They may be technically adults.
There are no kids around.
They're still 18-year-old girls. And, I still find that questionable that you would put someone with his background in with the young adults even.
It's like the problem is it doesn't make any difference. Because if you're a freaking bishop, you are going to have people who are members of your church trust you with their kids. It doesn't have to be kids being around you at church, as Wade Christofferson has proven over and over again, allegedly. Okay. So anyway, that's the problem I see with that argument. But I did want to bring that up. He was a bishopric member 5 years, 2006 to 2011, in the Columbus Young Single Adult Second Ward in Columbus, Ohio.
Yeah, I will only step in here and just say, whether it's Helen Mar Kimball at 14 years old, or it's, one of the Partridge sisters at 19 years old, or Fanny Alger at 17 or 18, young people being manipulated by predators who are older men still's gross, whether it's a girl under the age of 18 or a girl barely over the age of 18. It's still not right. Yeah. Okay. Let's see here. This is 3 years. Maybe I'm saying this. Bishopric 2000.
Paragraph.
Yeah. Wade Christofferson then served as first counselor in 2 different bishoprics from 2016 to 2019 in the Dublin First Ward, Columbus, Ohio. This is 3 years with access to children as a bishopric counselor in a family ward.
Then he's 4 years. Is that from the end of 2016 to the beginning of 2019?
It is 4. It is early in 16.
Yeah, it could be like 3.5. I was kind of rounding.
It's 3.
It's all more than brief. Let's just say
that.
I
am at math.
Yeah. Then he served as ward clerk from November 2019 to 2023 in the Dublin First Ward, Columbus, Ohio. Yeah. And again, ward clerk is an administrative position, but it's also a position of trust in a ward.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
That person is also working with, at times, acting in some forms as a secretary, even though he's not the executive secretary for the ward. The clerk often does do things for the bishop in terms of helping to get somebody or to check in on someone. He has a position of trust. And unless you say he cannot be around kids, every ward clerk is around kids in the church with isolated opportunities with them because of what ward clerks do in working with the bishop to arrange things. Okay.
And they got this nice little private ward clerk's office.
Yeah. With no window, by the way. There's that. Okay. Let's see here. So finally, he was the Stake Sunday School second counselor in the Columbus, Ohio North Stake from 2023 until 2025. This calling would have given him access to the youth in the stake. More than that, remember what ward conferences were like, and different stake leaders come into a ward building, and now you have certain positions, sort of nobody knows where anybody is on that day, and different people are being ushered out into groups to meet with certain people from the stake. And so the bishopric or the ward leaders in the past sort of stepped out of the way, and the stake leaders were in charge. And if a kid was missing from your class, you just took it for granted that the stake is doing what the stake does during ward conference. So there is, in some ways, even maybe not as many opportunities, but more shadowy opportunities if somebody wanted to be nefarious in how they pursued a child. There's less oversight from the ward leaders who week to week know what's going on, and at a ward conference sort of step back and go, oh, the stake's in charge today. So there's that. Okay.
They should have a big picture of this guy in the foyer of the ward with a big red circle around it and a big red line right through it.
Yeah. No, I'm glad you brought that up though, Bill, because when I posted this, I did have, some faithful people that always like to interact with me say, when you're the stake Sunday school president, you don't have access to children. And I thought the same thing that you did. And the people also said, and just because you're in a bishopric doesn't mean you would have access to children. And I'm thinking that, even if they're not in any of those positions, they're in the ward, they're trusted adults, there's complete access if no one knows to beware.
Who does the temple interviews for the youth in a ward?
The counselors.
The bishopric and counselors, sometimes primarily in some wards.
Yeah.
Who meets with the various age groups? Now, again, the modern church is managed a little differently, but if we go back 10 or 15 years, what did it look like? Wasn't there a counselor over one of the girl groups and one of the boy groups, and the other counselors over one of the girl groups, one of the boy groups, and then the bishop would take the priest and the laurels and
You went down the road when I was a second counselor, exactly like that. It goes bishop, the oldest, he takes the oldest kids. The first counselor takes the next oldest kids, and the second counselor takes the third oldest kids from 12 to 14.
Hence, when you say he's the second counselor, he's actually in a more fragile, vulnerable group that he's working with than if he's the bishop, for instance. So it makes it worse. It doesn't make it better. Okay, let's see here. Did we read the whole last one?
I think I had one last paragraph.
Okay, so the LDS Church's idea of serving briefly is around 8 years in 3 different bishoprics with access to children and conducting interviews with children, not to mention his other callings from 2019 to 2025. By the way, Elder Christofferson knew around 2020, the church wants to admit, where it is likely that he interacted with children. Also, Elder Christofferson's own family members were abused by his brother, and he had known since 2020. I don't think saying 2020 makes any of this better.
Very good. All right. Any other thoughts from you, Rebecca?
No, it's just the story that keeps on keeping on. And there were so many places where someone could have said something. This is generational. I think most of it, a lot of it is in the Christofferson family and, then other people in the wards, but somebody somewhere could have said something along this 30 30-year journey, and he could have been stopped, but he wasn't until the very youngest, most vulnerable in, I believe, the Christofferson family were abused.
For instance, if D. Todd Christofferson, apostle and second counselor in the first presidency of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, had done something about this in 2020 when he says he found out about it for the first time, though I think that's not true. But if he had found out about it that late, if he had done something about it, then this other girl, I believe it is, from November, would not have been allegedly sexually assaulted. Is not exactly the right word because it's over the phone, all right? But you know what I'm talking about. She would not have been victimized. He would not have had the opportunity to predate on her and other people that he's been doing even in the last 6 years. My goodness, this is incredible. And D. Todd, that's on you. It's on everybody who knew and didn't say anything about it. It's on everybody who thought that the good name of the church was more important than the safety of your own children.
Yeah.
The church's statement did not provide a response. This is the concluding part of the article. The church's statement did not provide a response to a Salt Lake Tribune question regarding whether Wade Christofferson's membership record was annotated to reflect his excommunication and the reason behind it, or if that annotation was removed at all. So they did not answer that question. Why do you think that was, Rebecca?
Well, I think we can guess why, but we do know from victim statements, and you can find all this on Floodlit, that amazing organization, that allegedly one of the victims was told, yes, it was annotated, and yes, it was removed. So, you know, the point is, it would have been annotated if the records were correct and let the first presidency know that he was excommunicated for CSA. We did a whole segment on the newscast on this. It's an administrative thing. Oh, go through the papers, secretary, annotation. So if they were up front and didn't spin that adultery thing and sent those records to Salt Lake, he would have had an annotation. Okay, that's a fact. The fact that he's in a bishopric again in 2006 means there was no annotation. That says to me it was removed.
Either they put it on and took it off, or they never put it on at all, and either one is damning to the church.
Yes.
Two other little things. You know, you mentioned RFM, the phone call, the snow, the friends. It has to go back beyond that. Somebody doesn't get on the phone with Uncle Wade, and over the course of one short phone call with Uncle Wade, know what he means by snow or friends. That has to be built up over time. So there are maybe in-person moments. Seems like an odd thing to sort of communicate over the phone, especially if you're a predator and you're trying to cover yourself. You don't want to get caught doing this thing. You're trying to do your thing in secret. You would have built up the definition of these words with your family members over multiple opportunities, and almost certainly some of those would have been in person.
Yeah, and letters. The dad found the letters.
Yeah.
Where could it be grandpa? It's all alleged. We don't know, but wrote letters. And the thing is, you would give family members access to older relatives. You know, you would. And that's about the only way I can see an older man being able to write those kind of letters to a younger girl where he described these little games and things.
Yeah. And use the code so that you and the little girl know what it is you're talking about. But if the parents get a hold of it, well, they have no idea.
Can you imagine finding that letter, though, after overhearing the phone call where the little girl took the phone allegedly into the bathroom, and overhearing that as a parent, and then going and finding the letters and realizing, oh, my God. I mean, that's the thing. This story is beyond. It's really hard to report on week
He's
after
lucky
week.
To be alive, Wade is. He should be in prison. He's going to be safer there, I think.
Yeah.
D. Todd Christofferson could have done a whole lot more to protect members of the church and members of his own family. It's a double-edged sword for him because he was neglectful in both responsibilities. I want to say one last thing, sort of an overarching thing. The church is trying to appear as though it's more serious about child abuse. It is saying in its handbook, for instance, that it wants its members to report to civil authorities. Because of the internet, Mormonism is in the news all the time around abuse. So members of the church are going to start, if they aren't already, they're going to start getting the message that abuse is wrong. It should be reported. My church, for some reason, seems to always be in the news about these things. That's going to create a slightly higher and growing motivation to begin to deal with abuse more appropriately. Yet the church still has the same policies and structures, same unhealthy boundaries, unsafe spaces. It's maintaining the part where the abuse can occur. Meanwhile, it's giving rhetoric as if it's trying to get better. What I say all that to say this, which is to the LDS church going forward, I can only think that because of those two things, you're actually going to have a lot more cases that are made known publicly where victims speak up. And if I were you, I would start making drastic changes to make church a safe space, because there is a threshold where the noise gets so high that we just saw last week on the newscast that of the 56% of people or 53% of people who were attending church that were surveyed, 18% of them no longer believe. You're running into a growing problem that's only going to get worse so long as your policies stay the same, but your rhetoric makes it sound like you're taking abuse more seriously, because you're creating an awareness in the minds of your members that is going to cause those two things to bump into each other much harder.
Mm-hmm. Good point. Well, that's the rest of that story. Back to you, Rebecca.
Oh, wow. What a story. Yeah. I was just reminded of, remember just a couple of months ago, those 100 CSA cases that the church is settling in California. That's just one tiny little area of California. And those are still kind of ongoing, trickling into the news. So I think you're right. People are going to start, you cannot help but notice at some point. So, all right, let's move forward. I think, Bill, you have the next story.
All right. This will be quick. Latter-day Saints aren't becoming liberal. There's this article, Idaho Statesman. It was in a couple of different places in the last week to 10 days, but in several places, the name of the article is How Latter-day Saint Church Members' Politics Have Shifted and Why. The original image just had an LDS temple in the background. I put an image of the current president, and I took the MAGA hat and made it our little quip of Make Adam God Again, which I think was new name Noah's doing. But that'll fit for what we're doing here to talk about. Latter-day Saints aren't becoming liberal, but they're also not as tightly locked into the Republican Party as they used to be. A recent study shows a noticeable drop in Mormon identification with the GOP over the last couple of decades, but only a small increase in Democratic alignment. In other words, they're not switching teams, but they are becoming politically uneasy. They're caught in the middle. What the data was showing, if I can just say it maybe in layman's terms, the Mormonism has often been very much aligned in terms of its members with the Republican Party. And what current data is showing is that Mormons are beginning to distance themselves from the Republican Party, but aren't necessarily aligning with the Democrat Party. So they're becoming more moderate. The tension comes from a mismatch between Mormon cultural values and where parts of modern conservatism have gone. The LDS tradition emphasizes order, institutional trust, moral seriousness, although the policies of the LDS Church don't, and a kind of measured respectability. But the current tone of politics, especially the more aggressive, anti-institutional style associated with figures like Donald Trump, doesn't sit cleanly with that, and issues like harsh immigration rhetoric or religious exclusivity. And you've got a population that's still conservative at its core, but increasingly uncomfortable with how that conservatism is being expressed. So they're taking a step back from the Republican Party, but they're not necessarily teaming up on the Democrat side. And this matters in places like Idaho, where Mormonism still carries real weight, both culturally and politically. That's where this article is from, Idaho Statesman. A significant portion of lawmakers are Latter-day Saints, but even they tend to say their faith guides their moral framework rather than dictating policy directly. We've heard that for decades and decades in Mormon parlance. So what you're seeing isn't a political realignment so much as a quiet internal friction a group that still leans right, but is starting to feel like the party it helped build doesn't quite reflect its own values anymore. And I'll just note the bigger picture. We've talked about in years past, Salt Lake County, for instance, finally got to the point where it was less than 50% Mormon, and even in the political arena, the church doesn't have as much strength or influence among the general population, although, as we pointed out, 9 out of 10 politicians still happen to be LDS. But what you're seeing in concentrated Mormon areas is that as Mormons become more sensitive, I think this is what's happening, become more sensitive to inclusiveness, empathy, validation of others being just as human as they are, even as they live a different expression of life, as the church has gotten more ambiguous maybe on the LGBT issue, and in other places, members of the church, I think, are listening a little more to their I'll say inner authority. That's a phrase I sometimes refer to. And that people are making decisions to be more moderate politically. They don't exactly align with the Democrats, but they're finding something abrasive about some of the messaging among the Republicans. And so Mormons, who are almost always just a shoe-in for being on the side of Republicans in terms of the majority of Latter-day Saints, I think just like Salt Lake County and the number of Mormons there, I think you're beginning to see members of the church be a tiny bit more politically neutral. And it only takes a tiny bit to make big differences in the political landscape. So any thoughts from you guys?
Well, I like that quote there. You said a significant portion of lawmakers are Latter-day Saints in Idaho, but even they tend to say their faith guides that. The reason I think this is interesting, because I wonder if former Oregon Senator Gordon Smith would have said the same thing publicly, the hopelessly church broke senator from Oregon who did everything the church told him to do. No questions asked. He was not representing his people. He was representing the church in office. He's a disgrace to the political office that he held. But I wonder if he would not have said the same thing publicly as these Idaho politicians are saying as well. Even they tend to say their faith guides their moral framework rather than dictating policy directly.
Yeah, I'd be curious to see the demographic of who's leaning. I mean, think about on the newscast, we've talked about women especially are, stepping away from Mormonism based on, political issues and treatment of people, things like that. So I would be curious about that. But, I think back in the day, my dad was somebody that just marked that box, straight party, right? I'm a Mormon. I vote straight party. I vote Republican, right? And my mom, she was kind of radical. She would actually go through and maybe make some different choices, maybe a Democrat here and there, not straight party. But that was kind of the Mormon way back in the day. It's really different now, I think. And I wonder if it is the younger demographic kind of saying, I cannot align with this. I think maybe out of habit or just not knowing what else to do. Some of the older, LDS people are still, I've always been, this, and I'm going to be that. But you're right, Bill, it makes a huge difference in some of these places where they've always just voted the same way. And now they're not. It can change a lot. It can make a big change in big ways.
And just to give you that, RFM, you're muted. Just to give you that data, Idaho is reporting that there was a 12% decrease among Mormons from the Republican Party, but a 6% increase into the Democrat Party. So you can see that it's not one for one. 6 of those 12 just stepped away from the Republican Party, but they're just sort of hanging out in the middle ground.
I was laughing at Rebecca because it made me remember when my mom and dad would go out to vote. It was like an event.
Yeah, a big deal. Me too.
Yes. And my dad would come home grousing that basically all of her votes had canceled out his. So what was the whole point of this anyway?
I think they were trying to teach us to be civic minded, but it was a big deal that we are going to go vote. Here's your TV dinner. We will be back. It was a big deal. It was exciting, kind of. You didn't really understand, but it was exciting. Well, that's a good story there, Bill. All right, let's move on. Oh my goodness, here we go.
Yay.
I know, it's very exciting. The worldwide or should I say galaxy-wide, young adult devotional is all about space. No, it's not about giving people space. It's about space and actually deep space. Now, my theory is, and I saw promos for this all through the last week. It actually happened on Sunday, is that, what's one of the more exciting events that just happened in the last couple of weeks? I mean, it's the moon flyby, right? It's everywhere. Yeah. And so my thought is that they're kind of trying to capitalize on this big event, and they're having this worldwide devotional for the young adults. It's Elder Stevenson, he and his lovely wife are the ones that are going to be giving this devotional. Like I said, it just happened yesterday. And so he put out this little promo. They're at the Clark Planetarium. You can see them there with all kinds of cool gadgets and things and planets. And I'm not going to show the video, but he made some strange statements. He said, you're going to join with us here in an environment that is one of deep space. I was kind of trying to understand that exactly. They seem to like the word of quite a bit, gatherers of light. But anyway, an environment that is of deep space is where they're going to be filming from. I know. I don't know what to think.
I feel like this is just an awkward segue, because all he's doing is having these people come out and watch a planetarium show, and he's going to try and make a spiritual moment out of it.
Yeah, you just pretty much gave my story. I can now move forward 6 slides. Thank you, RFM. That's right.
He's going where no Mormon has ever gone before.
That's exactly right. But, so they did try to make some connections. Here you can see a picture. And, if you're familiar with planetariums, which I'm sure you are, you kind of sit back. It's a dark sky, and they show you the different planets, they teach things, but in this case you can see the giant face of Jesus suddenly appearing in deep space. Right there it is. And Sister Stevenson said we can learn how to deepen our testimonies. They seem to focus on the word deepen, deep space, so everything was sort of a metaphor or some kind of analogy with deep, which was very interesting.
So the picture of Jesus actually showed up in the planetarium show.
I mean, it looks like they're right there on the stage, right? And there it is. So
I had no idea Jesus was that big.
Yeah, well, he's pretty big in some places. I did not watch the entire devotional. It's over an hour long. It is available on YouTube. I just couldn't bring myself to do it today, but I did take some screenshots. So here's one of the analogies. Elder Stevenson said, so as you think about deep space, which we so often do, think about how you can deepen your conversion. See? That's a good one.
There's the segue.
Yeah, that's a segue. That's a good one.
And then I told him that was a good segue.
Much to my surprise, when I went through my slideshow at the last minute, RFM had added something. Do you want to explain this slide? And then I added something to what you added.
Well, does it need any explanation whenever you say space?
Oh,
whenever you say revenge, whenever you say cold, whenever you say dish. This is the quote I'm going to be thinking of is Khan from Star Trek True. There's an old Klingon proverb. Yeah, revenge is a dish that is best served cold and with Corinthian leather. It is very cold in space.
And I had to see what Elder Stevenson would look like as one of the security team there. And of course, if you're familiar with the movie, Captain Kirk looks right at the screen and says, "Gone." I guess in this case, it would be Stevenson. I don't know. We'll have to see.
Not bad.
But it was all about space. The whole thing was about space. So here's a screenshot from the actual, there it is on the stage. Brother, Elder, and Sister Stevenson wanted to talk about how can we go even deeper into space. Yeah, it was very powerful and
this
dramatic.
Was at least a hard R, wasn't it?
Yeah,
if it wasn't X, it was a hard R.
I feel like they might need to work on their phraseology, their catchphrases. I'm thinking of Camille Johnson and the recent Do Hard with Jesus. I think they might need to work on it. But the whole thing was full of metaphors. Christ is the sun. The farther you go into space, it's cold. The light and warmth of Christ. A tiny little deviation in space will throw you light years off course. Come back. And then even a section where he said God has given the apostles and the prophets to us to be our cheerleaders, much like mission control. When they actually flew by the moon and yelled, we're doing the same for you. So it was all full of space, and it was very exciting to everybody. So I don't know.
Did Elder Stevenson talk about doing the Kessel run in just under 12 parsecs?
I don't think so. But my big question about it is, did he go through the planet names that Joseph Smith gave? People don't talk about this enough. I mean, while they were sitting there in the planetarium looking up did he point to things and say, now, according to Joseph Smith, there's Kolob, there's Oblish, Inish Goendosh, Kayan, I can't even pronounce that one, Limdi, Zip, Busel, Vinistry, Wayne's World. If some of you are hearing this for the first time, these are the names of planets, governing bodies that Joseph Smith was inspired to let us know exist.
Joseph Smith came up with Wayne's World before SNL was even invented.
Decades. Shine Fleece and Fleece. The one that makes me question it, because he's standing out there in the barnyard naming the stars for all of his followers. He says Wagon, Oaxen. I mean, that he's just looking in the barnyard. That star's called Wagon, Oaxen. Anyway, take a screenshot of this if you're not familiar. And if you don't believe me, as people don't, every time I talk about this, here it is in the notes of the Joseph Smith papers, notes on the Book of Abraham. And here is where he lists the names. And I kind of thought, if he's looking in a telescope and he says, and it has been revealed to me that this one is called Starry McStarface. I think that's a great name for a star. And I feel like that's what he would probably do today.
It is a great name. And that picture of Joseph Smith kind of looks like Andy Kaufman to me.
It does a little bit. So anyway, any thoughts about this unusual devotional? I know they were trying to be really edgy and really awesome, and they were filming from a planetarium, and they were trying to make the word deep work with deep space. Any thoughts, Bill?
No.
He's like, no.
No, I don't want to touch that with a 10-foot pole.
Thank
you. A 10-foot
much.
telescope. RFM, any thoughts on that?
No, I was just going to say, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. That's it. So I had to add this other quick little star story to this one. There was a big article in the Tribune. The headline is how a group of Utahns are working to save the galaxy, or at least our view of it. Really? Some people in Utah are working to save our night skies? Well, I would think one of the first things that they would tackle would be my picture there on the right, and that is the light pollution of the LDS temples that dot the valleys. I read through the whole article. Nobody really mentioned anything about the temple. They did mention that there was a high school that had some lights on, and that's kind of what made them form this coalition. I think this is fantastic. This is great. They did in the article mention, the author of the article mentioned how it says, after the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints asked Wasatch County to loosen its dark sky regulations in 2022, people around Heber started sounding the alarms over what the loss of light means to their sky, the light rules. And this is true. The LDS Church did go in there and say, let's just make it so we can make our big building. And the county commission said, that sounds great. We have 20 years worth of regulations, but they're gone. So anyway, it is an interesting idea, and they are going to try to work with people and protect the dark skies. But I really hope at some point they recognize that, temples being lit up all night, not good for birds, not good for animals, not good for people, and not good for the dark sky. They did talk about Flagstaff, Arizona, right? As an example of a town that has got their act together. They are the first dark sky ordinance city, and they have really strict dark sky rules. This group is hoping they can become something like Flagstaff. Well, they just announced a temple in Flagstaff, and I myself am looking forward to this fight where you have first dark sky city, you have all those ordinances, and then you have the LDS Church and their lawyers coming in. We will see what happens. There are already petitions, all kinds of things. We'll see. They haven't made too many moves yet, but I really want to see what Flagstaff is going to do to protect their first dark sky city status. So anyway, it's kind of an interesting article, interesting group. But again, they didn't say anything about what I consider something that puts out quite a bit of light pollution, and that's the LDS temple. So I think, that's the end of that. Any thoughts on that? Light pollution, we talk about it to death, so probably don't need to go through it again, but it'll be interesting to watch Flagstaff.
That first one, is that Bountiful?
Yes.
Can I just say that this is the problem with painting the temple with light from lights that are low and pointed up at the white temple in order to make it glow for, parsecs. But here's the problem. You can see it here is you can't paint it on the temple because it's going to go past the temple. All this light that's not hitting the temple is going past the temple to the left. And all this over here is going past the temple to the right, to the point where you can see this from outer space. And that's all the light pollution. There would be light pollution even if the temple itself were just that bright. But there's where a whole bunch more pollution comes from with this setup.
No, that's a very good observation. And people don't understand it's a certain reflective coating. It's called whitewashing. And so, yes, they're able to tell neighborhoods this will not probably glow in your windows. I mean, we saw something different in Cody, but what they don't understand is it'll do exactly that. And it is devastating to migratory birds. I know I sound so geeked out when I talk about that, but it's absolutely devastating. And I wish more people would take notice. So.
Well, how delightfully ironic that the LDS Church uses whitewash on its temples.
Oh, dear.
Because it uses it everywhere else, too.
Yeah, there it is. All right. Enough about deep, deep space. Let's go on to Bill's next story. Let's see. I think we're past that. Oh, you went back. That's right. You went back. There we go. Let's
move into something much more delicious. I'm actually surprised, by the way, that our nation hasn't gotten on board with the dirty sodas sooner than this. But it's finally happening, folks. A very Utah, very Mormon workaround, the dirty soda, has gone national because members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints avoid coffee and alcohol. Soda has become their go-to treat. And over time, it's evolved into these over-the-top dirty sodas like Dr. Pepper, which I love, dirty Dr. Pepper. A Dr. Pepper mixed with coconut cream and flavored syrups. What used to be a local quirk has now exploded into mainstream. You're looking over here at the Deseret News. There's a couple of other articles in the news about this, by the way. McDonald's introduces the dirty soda lineup. So what used to be a local quirk has now exploded into mainstream, largely because of the TV show The Secret Lives of Mormon Wives, which spotlighted the trend and turned it into a cultural curiosity. So what you're really watching isn't just a drink trend. It's a window into how a community that draws hard lines around certain substances still finds a way to build its own version of social indulgence and human connection. And now the world is giving it a try. Your guys' thoughts? I think that the risk here is that these little soda shops like Fizz and Swig, if they're competing against giants like McDonald's, who can deliver such at, a few dollars less per drink, it may cause some of those little mom and pop shops, which have some of them turned into big franchises at this point, but some of them to sort of struggle maybe to make a living if McDonald's and other places pick up on the dirty soda. But now I can just go through the fast food drive-through, get my dirty Dr. Pepper, and probably get it a couple dollars less than what the local Swig is selling it for. So your thoughts on the dirty soda phenomenon making its way out into the greater world?
Yeah. Have either of you guys ever had a Swig drink?
No.
No. Okay. So I have quite a bit. And I will say, I think this follows the trend of just younger people today. They're not drinking. I'm reading this everywhere. They are just saying no to alcohol. And so this is something different. And the dirty soda is everywhere. I was on a road trip this weekend. Every Maverick I stopped in had the option to add coconut cream, had, half and half there. You just kind of mix it up. And like I said, the original was Laverne and Shirley, a Coke and Pepsi, it was a milk and Pepsi. That was it. But in New York, they're opening a shop called Cool Sips, right? It's exactly like a Swig. And one of the Secret Lives of Mormon Wives, Whitney Levitt, is the new spokeswoman for it. This is amazing. And she just announced that she is quitting Secret Lives of Mormon Wives. She's following her Broadway career. She is going to be the spokesperson for Cool Sips. So this is big. And I do defend people that drink Swig drinks. It doesn't all have to have a soda base. A lot of people, including me, like the sparkling water or still water and, fresh fruit, things like that. So when you see somebody with a huge cup, like me sometimes, it may not necessarily be, heaps and heaps of sugar in a Mountain Dew. It might be a refreshing drink that's kind of good for you. So, but it's definitely trendy. You definitely look really cool when you're walking around with a Swig drink.
I understand this isn't the only kind of product inspired by Secret Lives of Mormon Wives. I hear that the famous furniture maker IKEA is going to introduce a new line of metal bar stools based upon the same program.
Oh my gosh.
It's a true story.
No,
they're lightweight for easy throwing.
No, in fact, one thing that's a signature item on Secret Lives of Mormon Wives is a big, chunky hand-knit blanket. Have you seen these blankets? The yarn is like that wide, and they're so thick, and you have to kind of wrap up in it on your couch. And then you have to have a Swig drink, and then you have to talk about, Marciano or all the problems. I finally got one of those blankets. last weekend. I've always wanted one. They're pretty expensive. I actually found one at DI. I know, terrible. And I thought, I can do it now. I can wrap up on my couch, my big hand knit, chunky yarn blanket. I can have my swig drink, and I can talk about Marciano. Everybody get ready.
Well, with your nom de guerre and nobody knowing your real identity, you can be a real secret wife of Mormon wives.
Secret wife
life of Mormon wives.
That's right. And did you guys know there's a spinoff? I know, now I'm turning this into Dish Everything. There's a spinoff in California now of Mormon adjacent influencers, you know, people that maybe grew up here in Utah, and it's a spinoff. It's going to be interesting. So
a TV show?
Yeah, another TV show.
When do we get our TV show? We're much more interesting.
California Wives. I know. I think we should have a spinoff called The Secret Lives of Newscast People.
Absolutely. This is called Mormon Newscast.
Mormon Newscast.
Like a sequel to the newscast show, but was that in the early 1990s? I can't remember when that was.
Remember that?
No, that was news. That was. I
had forgotten about that.
It was 1970s was newscast.
Yeah, I think so. Well, thank you for covering that, Bill. Do they not have a swig down where you are in Utah?
Oh, I've had swig plenty. I was
you have? Okay, I thought you both shook your heads. No, just RFM. Okay.
I was thinking maybe they could do a show, The Secret Lives of Multiple Personality Ex-Mormon Dives. Maybe that would be a fun show. Follow him around for weeks on end and see what kind of crazy things happen.
He would probably like that. So what's your favorite swig drink then, Bill, if you have had it?
Just the dirty Dr. Pepper.
The dirty Dr. Pepper
with some coconut cream.
Yep. Well, we're talking about sugar. I will segue into my next story, which is, you know, sugar is really bad for your teeth. My next story is about teeth. So if you're grossed out by teeth, don't listen to this story.
That was as good a segue as Elder Stevenson's.
I think it was pretty good. I didn't say of teeth, though, did I? The space that is, I don't know what they're doing. Oh my gosh, so many prepositional phrases. All right. So this is Sister Tamara. Or is it Tamara? I think it's Tamara W. Runia. She's a counselor in the Young Women's Presidency. You see her speaking a lot. RFM, you and I reported on her from 2 conferences ago where she said, "Get ye hence Satan." Do you remember that? She always has a very engaging and exciting way of talking. So this story is how a broken tooth taught this LDS woman leader about faith and the challenges of life. All right. So she is speaking at women's conference at BYU. And this is the story that she tells. It says the first counselor in the Young Women's General Presidency learned one day when she lost a tooth. Yes. Right before a speaking engagement in what turned out to be an embarrassing yet enlightening mishap. That's right. This is probably like the water bottle. Remember, you find some event that happens in your life, you know, and you kind of turn it into this amazing, inspiring story.
She lost a tooth.
The water bottle.
This is actually from the article itself saying she lost a tooth, not part of a tooth. She actually lost a whole tooth.
It says tooth, and that's why I was so fascinated, because that doesn't happen every day. It doesn't happen every day.
Past a certain age and you're
to an adult. Yeah, when you're a kid, they're dropping like flies. Anyway, it goes on to say, speaking about faith amid life's trials at the kickoff for this week's BYU Women's Conference, Runia recounted how she was at home preparing to talk to a group of young women for the first time. After her chores at home, she remembered that she needed to floss her teeth before leaving the house. I do that too. I floss my teeth a lot. Maybe not after reading this article. This is an AI recreation for
certainly after your chores.
Yes,
because we wouldn't want any of the young women to think she was remiss in doing her chores.
No, that's right. So after Runia began flossing, one of her teeth flew out of her mouth and dropped into the sink. Okay, so to me, that's a shocking statement, but it's just said so casually.
It was like a cannon shot.
Teeth fell into the sink. Yeah. It sounds like the stuff of nightmares, right? You know, when you're stressed out, you have dreams about your teeth falling out. I don't know if you knew that, but that's true. Running late, she super glued her tooth back in place, but found, as most of us would, that her lip was stuck with the glue to her tooth and threatened to rip if she tried to pull it away. I'm just saying,
if the whole tooth came out, is she saying she put super glue in the socket? In the wet
This is what is not clear. And I'm going to talk about this in the next slide. It says her tooth popped out and she glued it back in. Okay. Yeah. And they're saying it very casually, like it's something that would happen we could all relate to. To me, that's horrifying, right? And we'll talk about this in a minute. Eventually, Runia told the Marriott Center crowd Wednesday night she was able to use fingernail polish remover. So she's not only got super glue in her mouth, She's now also putting acetone in her mouth. Okay. These are two very toxic substances to unstick her lip. But the acetone, the fingernail polish remover, started to work on her red nail polish and it dripped down her white blouse. So tooth glued back in, lip stuck to tooth, fingernail polish running down the shirt. It's just a complete comedy of errors. And I'm sure all the women in the audience are laughing.
Whenever I'm doing minor orthodontic surgery on myself, I make sure to keep my white blouse on.
Yeah, she says, I changed my clothes, I grabbed my nose, I got in the car, and I remember looking at the rearview mirror and picking off the last little bit of cotton ball from my teeth and thinking, I can never tell anybody what just happened. But then my next thought was, why not? Yeah. I'm going to speak to these young women and their leaders about being real. Yes. Because I think she thinks this might be an experience that everybody can relate to.
I don't think she thinks anybody's going to be surprised that she would do something like this.
That's what I'm saying. Everyone can go, I remember when my teeth popped out. I mean, to me, this is like a major horrifying experience. So why wouldn't I share what life is really like for me? And here's where the inspiring message comes. These moments, Runia said, help strengthen her faith when fears and doubts arrive. At the same time, she warned, such anxieties can dim the light members are supposed to let shine. Faith is a muscle that needs to be exercised. So get over it, show your real self, let people know your teeth pop out, and walk with Jesus.
This is actually probably one of the more normal things that's ever happened to her.
I don't know. I just had to think about this for a minute. I really did. So I wanted to understand what it meant that your tooth fell out. Okay. So if her actual tooth fell out, like from the root, I had to go to some dental sites. If an adult's front, and she said it was her front tooth, falls out, it's a dental emergency, immediate action, 30 to 60 minutes. You're not going to speak in front of a crowd. You are going to an emergency dentist because they can save that tooth. If it is really popped out by the root, they can save it. Now, my guess was something else.
So this really is a miracle, is what you're telling us.
Yeah, it may be, or it may be. I don't know. If it really fell out by the root and she put super glue on the root and stuck it back into her gums, God help her, is all I have to say. What I feel may have happened is that possibly it was a veneer or a crown, but it was front teeth. So I think it might have been a veneer. That makes more sense that would just pop off. And it makes more sense that you could glue it back on, because they're already glued on with this dental cement glue. But that doesn't sound as cool. Girls, my veneer popped off. That doesn't sound right. Your tooth popping off is more dramatic and more of an inspirational story.
I feel like she flosses too hard. Yeah, I feel like she should back off on the flossing a little bit. Maybe she's going at it like a lumberjack if she's popping teeth out when she's flossing.
Yeah. And people in the chat are saying it could be a cap. It could be a veneer. It could be an implant. It could be a crown.
But it's not a tooth.
I think any of those things are more likely than your actual tooth. That's what I'm saying. But it doesn't sound as good to say my crown popped off or, that doesn't sound right. But the reaction and what she did, I still think is a little problematic. So of course I had to go to different dental sites. I had to read the back of the super glue. No, you should never use super glue to reattach, even a veneer. It says you should not do that. You should go see your dental professional. You should never use super glue or any household adhesive to fix a tooth back in your mouth. Doing so is dangerous and can lead to other severe health complications. And this is what I think. And so I feel like perhaps the LDS Church, because here's one of their female leaders who that the members hang on their every word and pay attention to what they say. She just said it's okay to put super glue and acetone in your mouth. I think maybe they should put out a disclaimer and say, this is not really what I was trying to say. It was just sort of a faith promoting anecdote. So
I feel like everything she did was okay except for keeping the white blouse on.
Yeah, well, you know what? Everybody handles it differently. But I will say, women's conference, it was a great story. And our friend Martine brought this to my attention that Camille did speak again. And we remember a few weeks ago when she spoke and said, when you do hard with Jesus Christ, the hard becomes holy, right? And we all they wouldn't give up this slogan. It looks like she's changed it slightly. And it's now at this particular women's conference, the same one that Runia told her tooth story. You can do hard things with Jesus, or you can go at it alone. That's your choice. So inspiring words from all of our leaders today. Any thoughts on the tooth story, Bill, or the veneer story, whatever it is?
Yeah. So, okay, I'll just say this. I know a person who chipped a tooth.
Mhm.
It was very distracting to see them with the chipped tooth. It
Yes.
really messes everything up in terms of
Yes.
appearance. So they would go get, I guess it's a crown or whatever, but they would get a fake partial tooth added on to the chipped tooth. And it makes so much more sense that that's what happened, because now
Right.
she's got something to glue to.
Yep.
Yeah, maybe you just don't go to the thing you have to go to. You call it in for the day. Like you say, you go see an emergency dentist and just recognize that you don't have to go out into the world that way. And this whole, you can do hard things with Jesus or you can go at it alone. That's your choice. Well, people are making those kinds of choices every day. And yeah.
It is.
Yeah, I think the general first presidency, not first presidency, but the General Relief Society presidency is going to be having a hard Jesus Christmas.
That's it.
And
Hard
I also want to ask this, because I find it hard to believe that a woman who looks like this would actually have this problem that she describes as occurring.
Well, veneers. I mean, she does have beautiful, beautiful teeth. So a cap, a veneer, like you said, a chipped tooth, some kind of and those can fall off, even an implant can wiggle loose, but all those things are kind of serious. Like you really do need to go in because something's going on, and it also pretty painful. And I can't imagine putting glue or acetone in your mouth.
I have to ask you something.
Yes.
Are you trying not to get the joke?
Am I trying not to get the joke? No,
I can't imagine that a woman who looks like this would have something like this happen to her.
Oh, well, do you know why? Do you know why I didn't get the joke? Because my little slide thing is right over her mouth.
I don't think her elevator goes all the way to the top. I don't want to be personal because she looks like a lovely person. I'm sorry this happened to her, especially with the white blouse.
She's a role model for all the young women, although young women, do not put super glue or acetone in your mouth.
Wouldn't be prudent.
Now, and there's one more slide. I think it's yours, RFM. You added that. Like I said, RFM is always messing around with my slideshow.
No, I'm not messing around. I am amplifying it.
Amplifying.
So this is where she got the idea from. It never happened. This is exactly what I thought of when you told me about popping off a part of the tooth. Is Aragorn, Viggo Mortensen, Lord of the Rings. We all know the story, don't we? I think she does. Yeah, he got his tooth popped out, and he was going to, didn't do it actually, though. He wanted it super glued back in to continue with the filming. And I think it was Peter Jackson. He said, no, we're not doing that. We're not out in the freaking, go see the dentist.
Yeah, please.
And come back. And he did. And they came back later that same day after seeing the dentist to continue filming. So that was a story that I thought of when you told that story.
Yeah. No, it's a great story because he's the hunky heartthrob of Lord of the Rings. You can't have him looking like that. He has to have the perfect smile. All right. I think our next story, if we're done with teeth, oh my goodness.
I think they could have CGI'd it.
Yeah.
Well, I think this is the last one, if I'm not mistaken. So, we've had these movies come out recently. Hugh Grant again. This is a Salt Lake Tribune noticing another horror movie, From Faith to Fear. Filmmakers are turning LDS history and teachings into horror movies. There's plenty there to work with. I can imagine a few dozen more. But this is a movie called The Angel, which was set and filmed in Utah. It centers on a polygamous trio circa 1881. So before the John Taylor Vision with Jesus, before the 1890 Manifesto, another Mormon-themed horror film is dropped, and it shows how LDS culture is becoming a go-to backdrop for unsettling storytelling. The short film, The Angel, pulls in familiar elements, missionary life, belief in divine messengers, strict obedience, and twists them into something dark and psychologically intense, as if they already weren't on their own. What's interesting is that this isn't random. Filmmakers are recognizing that a system built on blind obedience, worthiness measured by loyalty, and eternal consequences for not being obedient already carries emotional weight. So when you push those ideas just a little off center, it quickly turns into something that feels eerie and disturbing. I can't imagine that we're going to run out of movies that do utilize Mormon themes and often in a negative way. So this film's coming. I don't know much about it, but here's another movie that plays on Mormonism. Any thoughts from you guys on the cinema?
I'm just surprised there's a huge glaring omission here in this article, and that is Brent Bokovoy and Ronald's Little Factory. I mean, that is the absolute theme of that movie. I've seen it like 5 times, and I was at several different premieres of it. But, it's about a kid that, was trying so hard not to self-abuse the night before he goes into the MTC that he chains his hand to the bed frame. And they actually go through Marky Peterson's pamphlet of ways not to self-abuse and have ward members come over and try to help him. It absolutely deals with those themes. And it won several awards in different horror showcases and things. So I'm really surprised they wouldn't have mentioned that. And his new movie, which he talked to me about a couple months ago, is called Gum. And it's about purity culture embodied and personified by monsters. And I think RFM kind of knows something about that if he wants to talk about it or not.
I totally steal scene 88. That's it for me. And I'm trying to talk Brent Bokovoy into changing the title from Gum into Radio Free Mormon and Friends.
Oh gosh. Yeah, no, I think Gum is very provocative because it's about, of course, already chewed gum, that all of us as young people got that lesson. The girls were told, do you want to be already chewed gum? And the boys were told, do you want to end up with already chewed gum? So this is a really interesting genre. But yeah, if you guys haven't seen Ronald's Little Factory, it's out there. I think Mormonish even put it out once. He gave us the rights. But Gum, did they say when that was coming out, RFM?
I forget. I think I do know that they just finished shooting, but I don't know what that means in terms of post-production before it's released.
Right. Yeah. Brent's quirky and awesome, and his movies are kind of comedy horror with sort of a John Hughes 80s bent to it. I mean, that kind of a soundtrack. So yeah, they're really interesting. But we'll see. Mormonism is everywhere, even in the horror genre. Thank you for that story, Bill. And I think I did switch our slides up, so I have one more last little thing to mention. Now, Bill talked about this last week when he talked about the 5 meeting houses in Seattle that are for sale, right? Same time where they're building couple temples. So I call this temple building where there's shrinkage. Seriously? And of course, that's George Costanza. We all know about shrinkage. Do Mormons know about shrinkage? I don't think they do. So I'm kind of collecting examples of shrinkage where they are building new temples. And so if anybody has an example local, let me know. So here's one that I found. It's a ward right there where they're building the ginormous Lone Mountain Temple. We all remember following that, the council meetings, all of that. It's really large, 70,000 square feet, almost 200 feet tall. But here's a ward right next to it, right there, within walking distance of the temple. And they tried to have a priesthood commemoration activity. Right? Now, those were big back in my day. And when I had young men, that was a big thing. Everybody went. You'd go and you'd camp together as men and you'd celebrate the priesthood.
It's usually May 15th, right?
Yeah, exactly. So this email out to this ward right there where Lone Mountain is, they're building that giant temple, says it's been canceled. Not enough people are going to go. Now, it could be something else. Other people have pushed back and said there could be other reasons, but I don't know. I feel like a growing, thriving ward. Back in my day, at least, they all went. All the men left town. And then when they got back, all the women did the laundry. So that's one example where right there next to the Lone Mountain Temple. And the reason I bring,
I want to be clear on this. Does the church say why it is they're canceling?
It just says not enough attendance.
So the church says not enough attendance.
Yeah, the ward right there.
We don't have enough why would somebody argue with the church when the church is saying that there's not enough people going?
Because I have a lot of naysayers who I like to interact with on my different platforms. They have said to me, look, they actually took the step of going to Google Maps, figuring out this campground was over an hour away from the ward and said, you know what? I bet they just are too busy. It's a thriving, huge ward, but all the men are too busy. And I just say back in my day, that would not be the case. The
ward is so thriving that they can't get enough people to go to the activity. I got it.
Yes, that's it. And of course, my main point of all of this is the irony, because in every one of these temple building towns, what they stood in front of the town council and said over and over is, we must change your ordinances. We must have this tall temple. We are bursting at the seams. We are so big. Our members, they're flocking. We must have this. And there's no way for any of these councils to know if that's true or not. And who are they to say, I don't think that's true? I tried to tell them it wasn't true. But you know what I mean?
Fairview's the one that's just up the road from the Dallas temple, isn't it?
Yeah, and we're going to talk about Fairview too. I'm telling you, I'm collecting these examples where it's just like you're building this temple, and your platform in front of the council was, we have so many members, we can't contain them in these other temples. We've got to have more. And yet, anecdotally, these little things are kind of slipping through the cracks that I'm watching. Okay, so Seattle, we did talk about Bill's story last week where they sold 5 meeting houses. They have 3 temples, 1 announced, 2 about to be built within a 1-hour drive. And they just closed the 2nd ward in the area since the beginning of the year. Tremendous growth, as it said in the article. Need to build 2 more temples in Tacoma and now Marysville. Selling 5 buildings, 2 wards have closed.
Can I just mention something, Rebecca?
Yes, go ahead.
It is an hour drive between the 2, but smack in the middle of the 2 is the Seattle temple that's been there since 1980.
That's what I'm saying. There are 3 temples within an hour's drive of each other. Yes. So it just, because I know that part of their argument or what they present is we have a growing membership and we need to be able to, to build these temples. Again, they can do what they want, but I don't like it when people are misled, because I work with these towns. This is my favorite one that came up over the weekend. So we're all familiar with Fairview. We've all been following that forever. There is a meeting house on the location of where they're going to build the temple in Fairview, right? This is pretty common. There's a big piece of ground. There's the meeting house, and then there's Fairview. Now, their growing numbers was a huge part of what they talked about at every council member. There is a Dallas temple, like you said, RFM. It's about half an hour away, but they talked about just exploding numbers and needing to have this temple in Fairview because the membership was exploding. Well, they just closed a ward that met in the building on the temple site. To me, I find that extremely ironic. and I don't know if it signifies growth. They combined it. It was the 7th ward. They kind of closed it and put the membership into 2 other wards, the 3rd and the 4th ward. But this is a ward that met on the site where the temple is, that they told the council, we've got to have it. So I, of course, passed this on to Fairview, and they were like kind of scratching their head.
They were lying all along, including about the steeple doctrine that they made up out of whole cloth. They were lying about the growth, and that's why we need the temple.
Yeah. And that's it. So I'd love it if anybody else has any little anecdotal. I mean, I know these are small, but they're just very ironic, because if you watch any of those council meetings, it's always, our numbers are exploding. We've got to pollute your skies with light. No, we've got to build this, giant ass temple. So anyway, any thoughts, Bill, on that? I know you covered it last week, so you're aware of this. I think you said some things today that were really good today when we were talking about this.
Just the idea that there's an appearance of growth. They're saying growth in certain ways, and maybe they're telling the truth. Maybe we are having record convert baptisms. Maybe there are record number of missionaries going out year after year. But man, it just so many indications of data pointing to the church in decline. And I'll just note that temples are an outward appearance of growth. The closure of wards is demonstrable decline. If there are more wards closing than opening up, I don't care how many temples you build, the church is in decline.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's an indicator. And I will say, just with one last little slide, what is growing, big shopping districts, right next to temples, an incoming $2.3 billion, 470-acre mega development aims to be the plaza of the Northland. This is Kansas City. There's a temple there, and there's going to be a huge development. I mean, we don't need to go through everything, but it's going to be sports complex, entertainment venues, hotels, conferences, mixed use, restaurants. They're just building up this infrastructure around the area where the temple is. And I feel like this is kind of the way of the future going forward. Make this, secure little island, very lucrative, jobs. They often will fly people in from companies they trust to go work in areas to do this. It can be very lucrative for the people that get these contracts. And I think this is kind of part of the playbook, right? Just like City Creek. It'll be interesting to watch what happens. All right. Any final thoughts about anything that we've talked about, or we will move on to what's coming up this week?
The last thing I want to say before we move on to that is I just want to say that I hope my tie isn't the wrong shade of blue or anything. I'd hate to get us in legal trouble because of my choice in neckwear.
Is there some shading on that tie? I think I see
It's got 2
something.
shades of blue. Got stripes.
We might have to crop that out.
Yeah. Okay. So I just want to put that caveat in there.
No, it's a good thing that you brought that up. Okay. So what we all have going on this week, Mormonish is on Tuesday night. That's tomorrow night at 6 p.m. The title of our episode is I Was Told to Cease and Desist and Threatened with Excommunication by the LDS Church. And this is our friend Ganesh Sharian. I know he's such a happy, friendly, smiley, happy-go-lucky guy. You would not imagine that he had this experience about 3 years ago in conjunction with working on his book that he just published. And he shared this experience with us. Yes. And I just, as you kind of put these pieces together, people being shut down, people being threatened, silenced, maybe we need to widen the window or the net and look farther into the past a couple years. I'm not sure, but this is a really interesting story that Ganesh is going to share. And it's all about the process through which he went to get his book published and how certain points along the way, he did receive letters from church, legal department, and he did receive letters from local leaders that he was going to.
That sounds interesting. Ganesh has another side too. He has character. I had to give him a cease and desist letter myself once.
Oh, yeah. No, he does. He's very friendly. So anyway, tomorrow night, 6 p.m. Mountain Time. That'll be awesome. What do you guys have coming up?
We got something great. Great. It's on Wednesday. We're going to be dissecting the fun and fabulous debate that Robert Gurr had with Bill Reel a couple weeks ago. And we're going to go and revisit that. And we're going to take it apart and examine it. And my favorite part, I just always have to say it, is when the Nephites ate all the horses. And that's why there's no horse remains to prove the Book of Mormon is true.
Cray. There were so many things said in this that were just cray. So this should be a lot of fun.
This is what I'm doing tomorrow is I'm going through it and I'm getting video clips together. So if you want to add or make sure that any are in there, Bill, I'll make sure I send those to you. Because even though it's about Bill's debate, it's my show, it's my idea. I think I announced it Friday. I think I said, it's Bill's debate, but Bill wouldn't do this himself. Me, I will definitely do this. Yeah. It's because Bill is self-effacing, something that I don't suffer from.
Yeah, I think to hear Robert's answers on why there are no horses, to hear his answers on polygamy with child brides in Mormonism, those two alone will make this show worth it. But there's going to be, I'm sure, because I lived it, there's going to be a whole bunch of other sound bites as well. So excited to hear what you put together here, RFM.
And I'm going to want to find out what you were thinking during this debate and before and after and all that good stuff too.
Love it. I can't wait.
Is this debate still on his website or his channel? Because like I said, I went before and it wasn't there. Is he proud of it and putting it out there like you guys are?
I know it was put on his channel. It's on Mormon Discussion as well. And it's also on the moderator's website. I think Robert Gurr's channel is something like LDS Christian, I think is the name of the channel. But I can look into that. I'll try to have that data ready when we talk about this on Wednesday night. Yeah.
This debate went so bad for Robert Gurr that before the debate, he actually had a full head of hair.
Don't you find, though, that sometimes when there's a debate, of this nature, both sides think I did really well. I obviously aced it. I killed it. I just wonder if there's that element.
I have no idea what he thinks, but if he thinks anything like that, he's wrong.
I'll just a little note. I'll put this into the show Wednesday so folks can see it. But he posted in a Thoughtful Faith, Jacob Hansen's group on Facebook, that he was doing this debate, and Jacob Hansen said, "Don't. You're going to lose. You're going to get your rear end kicked." And he's like, "No, you wait. You see the master plan that I have, and you get to see it all carried out."
Because Jacob says, he says, "No, you can't debate Mormonism with Bill Reel. You'll get your ass kicked." That's why I don't debate Mormonism with Bill Reel or anybody else who knows anything about Mormonism.
Yeah. So it'll be interesting. I'll grab the image of that post and some of the responses. That'll be fun.
By the way, Jacob Hansen, at least Robert Gurr has the courage of his convictions, something which I might say you are lacking.
Yeah. And I'll say too, I think Robert genuinely believes. Now, I don't like his answers. I don't think they're rational, but he appears to me to be a sincere believer who's not playing games. He just wants to defend the religion that he loves and lives. Jacob Hansen is a whole nother kind of animal.
Yeah, Robert Gurr actually talked about Mormonism.
Yeah, sort of.
Okay, and then the next is something that you've got coming up, Bill.
Oh, sorry, yes. This is just the next in the series of a logical deconstruction of Mormonism. This is Why is Deutero-Isaiah in the Book of Mormon? I don't even think it's that long, maybe 6 to 8 minutes long. That'll show up Thursday morning around 9 a.m. But again, this has been a fun series to be doing. I'm really excited. We're about 10 in or so. 3 of them haven't been released yet. They're recorded, edited, ready to go, but they'll release each Thursday. But when this is all done, this will be 30 episodes, and I'm really excited about this project. If anybody's willing to take it seriously as a believer, they would over and over and over again recognize that the critic has the more rational argument on these issues that were hand-selected because they demonstrate such. So there's that.
Yeah, Elder Stevenson has heard about this, and his comment was that you're into the series pretty deep, Bill.
And I should go deeper.
You can still go deeper. You can always go deeper.
Yes. So Friday night, Mormonism After Dark, Radio Free Mormon. And we had a great time last Friday. We always have a great time. And we're hitting our stride with this. We've got sort of a format now, which allows people to come on and say a few things that are on their mind and hopefully get everybody a chance to do that. Now, this past Friday, we actually used up the capacity of the screen. First time it's happened. We found out what that capacity is. It's 10. 10 is the max that StreamYard will allow on a screen at one time. And I want to meet that again this coming week. There's a lot of people who show up, and I appreciate them all. There's other people out there who are thinking about showing up, not showing up, maybe because you're a little bit, I don't know, concerned about it. Don't be concerned. Just, drink some liquor, loosen up, and come on the show, and we'll have a great time. Okay, I promise. So that's going to be Friday. And then Saturday, RFM's going to have something great. To be determined. I've got several ideas. We'll see what happens. I'm sorry, what, Rebecca?
I watched your Mormonism After Dark from the forest on Friday night.
Tell me about it. Was it good in the forest?
It was fantastic. It was kind of scary. I was like at a campfire. I was watching Mormonism After Dark. I was going to call in, but I was with faithful relatives. I didn't know if they'd understand.
So what the heck was happening in the forest?
Not much. We went to the stock car races. That was really fun. Kind of, slumming.
Don't the cars run into trees?
No, this was not in the forest. We left the forest, went out and went to, but you know what? I will tell you, I did learn one thing. Easter, people give you peeps, right? Those little marshmallow chicks. Nobody really likes them. Kids like them. They're kind of na. If you roast those over a campfire, I'm not kidding. They are incredible. They puff up really big, kind of start whistling, and then, oh my gosh, they're incredible. I just have to throw that out there. I didn't know that.
Do they catch on fire?
They can catch on fire, just like regular marshmallows, yeah. But they have kind of a candy coating. You have to be careful. That can scald the inside of your mouth. You have to wait a minute. But I would recommend if anyone has leftover Easter peeps, make a bonfire.
I hope you didn't scald your mouth.
I did not. If I did, I'll use some acetone and super glue, and I'll try to make things better.
Sounds like a plan.
All right. So you're not telling us what your Saturday is, but you...
Oh, it's going to be something great.
We'll have something. Okay.
I mean, that's so far out there. I can't even start thinking about this. I mean, tomorrow I'm spending the day, going through the debate, and I will get to it. It will be fantastic. Trust me on this.
It always is.
Last time it was with me and Colby, and we dissected and vivisected Jacob Hansen and his getting filleted by Allie Beth Stuckey. It's great. It's got over 14,000 views. Everybody likes to watch a good Jacob Hansen dunking. And this is a good Jacob Hansen dunking.
And Colby's amazing. Anything he's on is well worth watching. So, all right. I think we did it. Oh, there it was. Radio Free Mormon. That's our last slide. All right. Any final comments? Or I believe that we've covered it as much as we possibly can for this week. It was a lot. Any last words, Bill?
Can I just say one really fast thing? Somebody in the live chat said, Bill, you ought to turn those 30 episodes into some sort of book. I just wanted to note that's exactly what I did. So if I can just take that off for just a split second. I'm actually quite pleased with this. So far, 13 reviews on there, 4.8, a logical deconstruction of Mormonism. You can get it. It's available for $7.99 on Kindle. $0 is an audiobook. If you've got a membership with that, but I think it's like $7.99 for that as well, and a $9.99 paperback. So I've sold quite a few of them already. The reviews have been great, so I think people are enjoying it.
I'm going to buy it right now. I totally forgot to buy it. I keep meaning to. I'm going to do it as soon as I have to end the show. Then I'll buy it. So, all right. Well, thank you everybody for hanging in there with us. Thank you, RFM. Thank you, Bill Reel. We will see everybody next time, Monday, always on Monday, 6 p.m. Mountain Time for the Mormon Newscast. Thank you, everybody.
Good night.
That's a wrap for this week's edition of the Mormon Newscast. We appreciate you tuning in and sharing this time with us. Keep the conversation going and stay informed on all things Mormonism. Until next week, wishing you peace and joy. See you next Monday at 6 p.m. on the Mormon Newscast.